Hello, this is Tomonori, your instructor for Japanese 103. Today we are going to talk about ageru, kureru, and morau. Okay, so ageru, kureru, morau is one of the most notorious grammar in Japanese. It's people consider this is one of the most challenging grammar unit for intermediate level. And the translation of ageru, kureru, morau are giving, to give and to receive. Okay? So basically, it's the transaction between two people. One person gives something to other people. So we have two individuals here. One is the giver, and then the other one is the recipient. And also, you have to have an item. So there's an item for the transaction. Okay? So you always have, whenever you use ageru, kureru, morau, you always have their giver, someone who gives the item, and someone who receives the item, recipient, and then also the item. Okay, and if you think about the verbs to give and to receive, it's actually, you can talk about the same transaction. It's just a matter of perspective, right? So if I say the teacher gave the test to students, so you have three things: the giver is a teacher, and recipient is the student, and then item is the test. You can talk exactly the same thing. The teacher gave the test to the students. You can say exactly the same thing from different perspective, which is the students received a test from the teacher. So you are talking about exactly the same action, same transaction, but now you're seeing in terms of the recipient. Okay, so in Japanese we can do the same thing. So basically, ageru, kureru, morau, you do the same thing as to give and to receive. Okay, so we can say, so ageru, kureru is something close to give, and we'll talk why we have two different things to give, but for now this is just to give, and morau is to receive. Okay, the same way in English, if you say to give, you have the giver as a subject. So someone who gives is the subject of the sentence, and then recipient is marked by what we call oblique case, and in Japanese it's ni. So ni is indicates the second participant, in this case recipient, and then item, which is marked by O. Okay, so when you say to give, subject is marked with wa or ga, in this case the giver, and oblique case, which is the second participant, is marked with ni, and then finally the item is marked with the object marker, which is O. Okay. So 私は友達にコーヒーをあげます。So あげる is to give. So I give to friend coffee. Right? I give coffee to my friend. I give coffee to my friend. Okay. The same way, 先生は友達にコーヒーをくれます。先生は友達にコーヒーをくれます。 the teacher gave coffee to friend. Okay, so that's how it goes. When you have a to give, あげるくれる, always the giver is the subject. Okay, and then if you do the もらう, which is to receive, now the subject flips, right? Like we did, the student received the test from the teacher. Now the recipient is a subject. So now はが indicates the recipient. 学生は先生に. So now oblique indicates the giver. コーヒーをもらいます. Students received coffee from the teacher. Right? So basically these two sentences exactly the same. It just matter of the perspective. One you're seeing in terms of the giver, and the other one seeing the same action and transaction in terms of the recipient. Good. Okay, it's a little confusing, so just to recap, remember you have to have three things when you talk about the giving and receiving. One is the giver and recipient and item, right? So you have to have three things in a sentence. Since you have three things, you have to have three different markers in Japanese particles, right? And we have subject, we have an oblique ni, and object o. Okay. What happens is subject can mark either giver in the case of あげるくれる, or subject can mark the recipient when it's もらう. Okay, this is exactly the same as English, so I hope this is not too difficult, right? You can talk about the same thing from different perspective. Since you're looking at the same thing from different perspectives, subject can be a giver or subject can be a recipient. Then oblique marks the other one, recipient or sometimes giver. Okay, so that's the basic structure of the give and receive. Okay, and I mentioned that あげる and くれる, both of them are to give, and we have two different things because there are two different to give in Japanese, so which is very different from English. Okay, so here we have to talk about the idea of the in-group and out-group. So when you speak in Japanese mind at least, have clear distinction between someone who is inside or outside. So sometimes it's called uchi. Uchi is in-group and out-group is soto. Okay. Of course, the closest person closest person to you is the yourself, right? So this is I, and which is the very, very inside of in-group. So you are the closest to yourself, obviously, right? And in-group may include other people who are close to you, such as your family members, close friends, or someone who is here and now, right? So it's not necessarily about the social relationships. Sometimes the physical presence indicates the in-group and out-group. So when you talk about someone who is not here, of course, they represent more out-group as opposed to someone who is here right now, which is in-group. So that's the current interlocutor. Okay. And out-group may include the people you don't know, or someone who are not present. You talk about someone, although they are close to yourself, but if they are not right there during the conversation, sometimes the person becomes out group. Okay, so the biggest distinction is you have an in group and out group. Okay. So this difference represents the difference between あげる and くれる. Okay. And remember, あげる and くれる are both to give. So the giver is the subject. The difference between あげる and くれる is the direction in terms of in-group and out-group. Okay. Sometimes the transaction takes place someone who is in-group to out-group. So things moves from someone close to you to someone who is not close to you. So if the things moves to out-group, we use あげる. Okay. And then if the transaction takes place from out-group to in-group, we use くれる. Okay. Both of them, subject is the giver. Okay. Keep in mind, this is a little bit confusing. It sounds like the difference between to receive and to give, but it is not. あげる and くれる, both of them are to give. Always the subject is the giver. So let's see a few examples. So let's pretend that this is 私 and Yamada-san is your close friend, and Lin-san is stranger. Okay, so 私 is in group. You are the center of universe, and Yamada-san represent in group. Right, you're close. Yamada-san is closer to you compared with Lin-san, who represents out group. Okay, so if you want to talk about this transaction, so this one is 私 gives a pen to Yamada-san, who is your close friend. It becomes 私はYamada-san にペンをあげる。私はYamada-san にペンをあげる。Okay. Remember, both of them are to give, so giver is the subject. Who gives is always a subject. 私はYamada-san にペンをあげる。Okay. Let's think about this transaction. 私はリンさんに T シャツをあげる。私はリンさんに T シャツをあげる。Okay, so let's think about this transaction. Okay, so it's coming from Yamada-san to Lin-san. Okay, since Yamada-san is closer to you, this transaction is outwards, right? It's going from in group to out group, which is Lin-san. So we say 山田さんはLin-さんに辞書をあげる。Okay? So あげる is outward. So it's coming from your side to outside. Okay? So let's think about this transaction. Okay? So it's coming from Yamada-san to 私. Since Yamada-san is the giver, Yamada-san is the subject of the sentence, right? 山田さんは私に本をくれる。山田さんは私に本をくれる。山田さん gives a book to me. Right. Let's think about this transaction. リンさんは私にノートをくれる。Okay. Lin-san gave me a notebook. Okay, so let's think about this transaction. Okay, so Lin-san is out group and Yamada-san is in group, and radio comes from out group to in group. Okay, and since this is Lin-san is a giver, so this is a subject. Lin-san は山田さんにラジオをくれる。Okay, so that's how it goes, right? So all of them, the subject is a giver. You could have described this situation with もらう. You can say that. So for example, this one. 私は山田さんにペンをあげる. You could have said that 山田さんは私にペンをもらう. Yamada san received a pen from me, but that's not what we are trying to do. We are trying to think about the difference between ageru and kureru. So in both ways, the subject is a giver, right? So always the giver starts. So we say, 私は山田さんにペンをあげる. Or 山田さんは私に本をくれる. Both of them are to give. The subject is the giver, starts with the giver. Okay. But when things moves from inside to outside, so for example, in this case, this one is going outside. This one is going outside. So anything comes from you, it's going outside, right? So once it separates from you, it always goes outside. Or something comes from in group to out group. Okay, so that's represent ageru, since it's coming from inside to outside. Okay, and these ones represents this one represents inward. Okay, so it's coming closer to you. Okay, so anything you receive is inward. Since it's getting to you, you're the center of universe. So anything you get, it's coming inward. Okay, or sometimes someone outside of the group gives something to in group, such as this one. So that also represents inward giving, right? So then we use くれる. Okay, so it's a little confusing, but that's what the difference. That's the difference between ageru and くれる. Okay, so here we have more examples. And Ozaki-san is your close friend. And Alice-san is a stranger. Right. So let's talk about this transaction. 私は尾崎さんに花をあげる。Let's think about this transaction. 私はアリスさんにペンをあげる。And let's think about this transaction. 尾崎さんはアリスさんに雑誌をあげる。Okay, so that's the old examples outward. Okay. Let's think about this one. 尾崎さんは私に時計をくれる。And this one. アリスさんは私にケーキをくれる。Okay. And finally this one. アリスさんは尾崎さんに CD をくれる。Okay. Let's try using もらう。Let's try using morale to describe this transaction. Okay, now you have to start with the recipient, right? Since the morale is the opposite of the あげる and くれる. So we say 尾崎さんは私に花をもらう. Okay. Or let's talk about this transaction. Now you start with the recipient, which is 私. Okay. 私はアリスさんにケーキをもらう. Right? So as long as you start with the recipient, there's only one receipt in Japanese, which is same as English. But when you talk about to give, if the subject is the giver, you have to think about which directions the things are moving. Is it coming close to you or going outside of you? Okay. So there are a few examples here. Yeah, you can take a look and talk about it. There are a few sentences here as well. Okay. Yeah, so あげる and くれる is one example of the in-group and out-group. And this is where sometimes like you have to think about the social distance among the all people you're talking to, right? So in English, you don't care who is close to you or who is not close to you. Let's say you have two friends right here, and one of the friend gave something to the other friend. Depends on how you say あげる and くれる. You're just saying that someone is closer to you than the other. So it creates somewhat awkward situation because you have to, if you think both of them are equally the good friends, like three of your good friends, you don't want to imply that one of the two friends you have is not, who is closer than you the other. Okay. So then maybe you should choose もらう, which is a neutral. Okay, so I hope you get some idea about あげる and くれる もらう. Again, this is one of the most challenging grammar elements in intermediate level, so you probably have to spend more time to get used to using it, but I think this was a good introduction. Thank you.